On Christmas Eve, 1945, the Sodder family was living in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, along with their 9 children, were a hard-working, close-knit family with no major enemies and a simple life. But that night, the family's world was shattered when a devastating fire engulfed their home. 5 of the children perished in the flames, but their bodies were never found. The mystery surrounding the death of the Sodder children has lingered for decades, raising questions, fueling speculation, and leading to theories that are still debated today. Was it a tragic accident, or was something far more sinister at play? The fire and the night of tragedy. The evening of December 24, 1945, began like any other holiday gathering in the Sodder household. George, the father, had worked hard all day and was eager to celebrate Christmas with his family. The children, full of holiday cheer, played together and awaited the arrival of Santa Claus. After dinner, the children were allowed to stay up late, watching a movie and enjoying the holiday spirit. Around 10:30 p.m., the parents went to bed, and the children continued their activities in the upstairs bedrooms. At about 1 a.m., Jenny, who had been awake, noticed that the house was strangely quiet. She then heard a loud crash, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the roof. She woke up her husband, George, and the 2 rushed downstairs to investigate. As they did, they noticed a faint smell of smoke in the air. To their horror, they found that the entire house was engulfed in flames. Frantically, George and Jenny tried to wake the children in the upstairs rooms, but the smoke and flames made it nearly impossible to get to them. They managed to escape the house, but 5 of their children, Maurice 14, Martha 12, Louis 9, Jenny 8, and Betty 5, were left behind. The couple immediately ran to the road to seek help from neighbors, but when they returned, the house was completely consumed by the fire. The fire department arrived too late to do anything, and the house was reduced to ashes. The aftermath, the search for answers in the days following the tragedy. Authorities began their investigation, but no traces of the 5 missing children were found. The official report from the fire department suggested that the fire had burned so hot that the bodies had completely disintegrated, leaving no remains behind. The Sodders, however, were unconvinced by this explanation. They believed that their children were still alive and that something more sinister had occurred. There were several strange elements surrounding the fire that led the Sodders to question the official story. First, there were no remains of the children's bodies, despite the fact that the fire had not burned for as long as a typical house fire. The fire department had claimed that the heat of the blaze was intense enough to reduce everything to ashes. But this did not explain why the children's remains were absent. Second, there were reports from witnesses who claimed to have seen strange vehicles and people in the area that night. Some even suggested that they had seen the children after the fire, raising the possibility that the children had been kidnapped. George and Jenny decided to take matters into their own hands. They hired private investigators and began to search for answers on their own. Over the next few years, they uncovered a series of bizarre clues that deepened the mystery. These discoveries, combined with the strange circumstances surrounding the fire, would lead to numerous theories and suspicions. The theories behind the tragedy: 1. The fire was a result of arson. One of the most prominent theories that emerged was that the fire had been deliberately set. George Sodder, who had a history of conflict with local authorities, believed that the fire was a form of retaliation. He had been outspoken in his opposition to the local government and had made enemies, including some who were believed to have ties to organized crime. The Sodder family's home was located in a rural area, and it was thought that someone had deliberately set the fire in order to harm the family. The Sodders pointed to several pieces of evidence that supported this theory. For one, they believed that the fire had started in the back of the house, where the children's bedrooms were located. They also noticed that the phone lines to the house had been cut prior to the fire. This suggested that whoever was responsible for the fire had planned it carefully. cutting off the family's ability to call for help. Additionally, the fact that no remains were found in the ashes led George and Jenny to suspect that their children had been taken out of the house before it was set alight. The children were kidnapped. Another theory that gained traction was that the children had been kidnapped before the fire started. Some witnesses reported seeing a strange man or group of people near the house that night. One neighbor claimed to have seen a car parked near the Sodder house around the time of the fire, but the vehicle was gone by the time the fire was noticed. This led some to believe that the children had been taken away by force, possibly for ransom, or as part of a more sinister plot. The idea that the children had been abducted was reinforced by reports from people who claimed to have seen the missing children in the days and weeks following the fire. Some believed they had spotted the children in nearby towns or even in different states. In particular, George Sodder received several anonymous phone calls and letters over the years, each containing cryptic messages suggesting that his children were still alive. Despite these leads, no concrete evidence ever surfaced to confirm that the children had been kidnapped. 3. The children survived. The fourth most chilling theory, which still persists to this day, is that the children survived the fire and were later taken to another location. Some believe that the children managed to escape the fire by crawling out of the windows or escaping through an unburned portion of the house. Once outside, they were possibly picked up by a passing vehicle and taken away. One piece of evidence that supports this theory is a photo that George Sodder claimed to have received in 1952. The photograph appeared to show 5 children who resembled his missing children. The photo was taken in a foreign country, and George believed that it was a clue to their whereabouts. Despite his efforts to follow up on the lead, no conclusive evidence was ever found. Additionally, the Sodders were never able to explain why the fire had been so selective. The parts of the house where the children were sleeping seemed to have been burned more intensely than other areas, which raised questions about the fire's origins and how it had spread. Some theorists believed that the children had survived the initial blaze and were taken by someone who knew they were still alive. The continuing mystery in the decades following the fire, the Sodder family never gave up on their search for answers. They continued to receive letters and phone calls, some of which seemed to offer cryptic clues about the fate of their children. The family spent years pursuing leads, and despite numerous dead ends, they remained hopeful that their children were still out there somewhere. The mystery of the Sodder children's disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Theories about the fire, the possible kidnapping, and the fate of the children continue to circulate, but no conclusive answers have been found. Over the years, the case has gained a cult following, with people from all over the world trying to piece together the clues and solve the puzzle. Despite the passing of time, the Sodder family's quest for justice and closure remains as strong as ever. In 1968, George and Jenny set up a billboard near their home, which displayed the names and photographs of their missing children. The sign stayed up for years, and it served as a constant reminder of the family's unresolved tragedy. Conclusion: the mysterious death of the Sodder children is a haunting case that continues to baffle investigators and intrigue the public. Whether the fire was an accident, an act of arson, or something more sinister, the fate of the 5 missing children remains an unsolved mystery. Over the years, the case has sparked numerous theories and led to countless questions about what really happened that fateful night. The Sodder family's determination to find answers, despite the many obstacles and dead ends they faced, speaks to the enduring power of hope and the drive for justice. While we may never know the full truth behind the tragedy, the story of the Sodder children serves as a reminder of the mysteries that exist in the world waiting to be uncovered.